So I'm from UNIDO, but the project we're about to start is funded by the GEF, the Global Environmental Facility. But of course, this is in partnership with the DTIC and also NCPC. So perhaps just a very quick glance of what UNIDO is about. I think you've heard a lot about UNIDO at the moment, but this is just a very quick slide, is to give you a sort of a glance. The UNIDO, or the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, is a specialized agency of the UN based here in Pretoria, and its mission is really about what we call ESID, which is Inclusive and Sustainable Industrial Development, and it has a very broad field of partnerships, but essentially it's looking at its work on 4 enabling functions. So the first one is technical cooperation, analytical and research function, as well as convening partnerships, as well as normative functions and standards. So essentially, when we have a project like this, we try to incorporate these functions. It has various programmatic focus. The work we currently do, especially this project, is looking at safeguarding the environment. So why the Eco-Industrial Parks project? So this is just a very brief understanding of why we're doing this. So as we can appreciate, there's very much linkages between our ambition for net zero greenhouse gas emissions, so industry and climate change, especially here in South Africa. As it was mentioned previously, we have a very energy intensive industrial sector. So the direct emissions, indirect emissions in South Africa make up a lot of, as you can see, the percentages of energy related carbon emissions. And of course, we have industrial emissions, ambition, and we also have a share of industry-related carbon emission, CO2 emissions. So this is a graph is specifically looking at South Africa. So the energy demand by sector, this is the Department of Energy at the time in 2016. You can clearly see there that the industrial sector has one of the highest final energy demand in the country. And we do have a lot of industrial parks. There's not only public, but also private industrial parks. And with the footprint that it currently has a huge, actually, potential to also make an impact in our decarbonization ambition. So manufacturing, industrial production, there's quite a number in South Africa. So as I said, it plays an important role as a hub for business and centers of employment. And given the relevance of manufacturing and industrial production, therefore, we may be able to understand how we can unlock this huge potential for sustainable energy consumption. So as my colleague later on, Ms. Maja, we went to various site visits in the country to determine exactly what kind of sustainable energy solutions there could be to lower the carbon emissions. So I think, as Mr. Matla was saying, they're doing some solar, but obviously, as we speak on later, the kinds of interventions are also very site-specific. So you may not be able to only introduce solar. There could also be biogas. There could also heat processes that could be shared. So as we will speak to in the later slides, the kinds of interventions are also very context-specific, very site-specific. So this is why the 6 that we've chosen in this project, we're hoping to learn very much how we're able to implement these kinds of interventions. Okay, so about the project, a very quick one. What is overall objective is to reduce greenhouse gas within the industrial parks. As you can see there, here, the map of the country. Ngonatari is going to mention a bit more, but there are 6 shortlisted IPs that we've identified in various parts of the country to see how we can be able to have these kinds of interventions. And as I said early on, this is our budget at the moment, but of course we have co-financing available for the project. It will be around starting to implement later this year for 4 years. And our execution partner is NCPC, and then there are various components to the project which I'll talk about briefly. So as I've probably said, or you probably mentioned it before, UNIDO is not only working with eco-industrial parks. It obviously has alignment. For example, this is why we're here. It's been working with the IEE, or Industrial Energy Efficiency Project, for 10 years. So we're trying to build onto those networks, onto those expertise and capacities and capabilities. So of course it needs to align with the industrial park revitalization, which Mr. Byrne is here working closely with him on that. And in in terms of the development of industrial parks, it's looking at integration of local and regional development activities. And in planning for this project, we obviously, as part of the GEF, you need to be able to engage with different stakeholders to really understand what the interventions are for the project. And so these were the common barriers that we've identified in preparation for this project. So there was a lot of questions about, you may have very interesting interventions, but of course you need to look at ideas of integration as well, coordination. In addition to technical demonstration, how are you actually providing these interventions that coordinate with municipalities as well? So this is an urban industrial nexus intervention, and of course the opportunities and benefits and lack of access to finance. So these were the common barriers that we've identified in preparation for this project. So, and those were other linkages as well, as we all appreciate. Everyone's talking about just energy transition. How does it align to those kinds of discussion? And as I said, this project is also in alignment with the IE project. And of course, we all know about the renewable energy program in South Africa, and then the SARM, which is part of DTIC's master plan. And then there's other linkages of city support program and treasury. So these are all the kinds of engagement we've had to be able to discuss. So in alignment to those barriers, because there was a lot of questions about integration, lack of access to finance, technological demonstration. So as a very brief, high-level outline, so the project of outcomes and objective is essentially delineated into 3 components. The first one speaks to the barriers of integration and coordination. So we're looking at how government and local authorities can be able to work together in order to implement these kinds of solutions. And the second one is about technical demonstration. So it's not only auditing or providing energy profiles, but we're hoping to come up with some sort of demonstration as well of the energy solution. And then the third one looks at the lack of access to finance. So hopefully this project that we have will then be able to address in some way of those lack of access to finance. Okay, and then as I said, this project will start later this year for 4 years, but essentially our main executing entity would be NCPC, and then UNIDO is part of the whole implementation, but it will be executed by NCPC. Okay, so the next part of the slide will be taken on by Ms. Maja, who's from NCPC, and so I'll leave it to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ngwanatari, and I'm one of the project managers at NCPC. As Blanche has mentioned, we'll be working on this project, which is really an expansion of the work that Lee and Henry have been doing with industrial parks. And our focus will be on the energy supply and energy demand side of things at industrial parks. Okay, so we've went through a process where we selected 6 pilot parks that we will work with for this project. And the next slide is just to give you an idea of who those parks are, what their profile look like at a very high level. And some of the criteria that we applied in the selection of this, we looked at the historical interaction of the parks with the NCPC, with the Global Eco-Industrial Parks program that Lee and Henry have been running. So in short, we have pre-selected Atlantis in the Western Cape, Guha and East London in Eastern Cape, Eka Industria, Putadi Chaba, and we have introduced a privately owned industrial park based in the KZN region, owned by AECI Properties. So in a nutshell, this is what the profile of those parks looks like. A lot of them have some common sectoral activities happening. We see agro-processing, automotive, logistics and warehousing, bit of food and beverages, as well as chemical manufacturing that is mainly focused in the KZN IP that we have selected. We have gone through a process where we visit the parks just to have a chat, to start the discussion around what we seek to do with the project and try to understand how energy is managed within the parks and potential areas where the project will add value to them. And of course, always making sure that we link that with the work that the Global Eco-Industrial Park program has started. Okay, just some pictures, few snaps of some of the site visits that we've done during this month of May. And we've also had an opportunity to start engaging even the tenants within these parks to start getting an idea of energy management or energy and supply of energy issues within the park. And we find quite diverse setups of energy supply within these parks. For example, at Mbongotuni, we have scenarios where you've got a centralized supply of energy, whereas in the Guha, each and every tenant has their own energy supply contracts with the municipality. So this program will be looking at those type of differences and seeing what solutions that are tailor-made to the profile of these parks would be most suitable for them. Part of the development process of this project was very extensive stakeholder engagement process so that we can feed into the design of the project what the needs are on the ground. As a result of this, we had several workshops. One of them was in January, where we invited a variety of stakeholders, including the park themselves, representatives from the government. And in essence, we tried to center the discussion around three pillars, trying to get an understanding on what the required institutional frameworks are to support the initiative around sustainable energy system and the synergies between industrial spaces and urban spaces. So we explored that topic. We also tried to get more insights around the technical and economic challenges of introducing sustainable energy solutions in industrial parks. And lastly, we had discussions around the social aspect of things, how the parks interact with the surrounding communities, are the opportunities where, by virtue of implementing sustainable energy solutions at the parks, the surrounding communities can reap benefits from some of those solutions. Okay, and just some highlights on what those outcomes were around the first point for institutional frameworks, looking at the legislative side of things. Some of the ideas that were raised in those stakeholder engagement session was the need to establish a stakeholder forum where ideas will be discussed. So integrating this in relevant or existing networks. And also it was highlighted that we need to do a very thorough work around baselining and surveying and mapping energy networks within industrial parks, understanding the demand and the supply side of things, what renewable energy, if any, resources are available at those parks. The stakeholders also highlighted the need for awareness raising and capacity building at multiple levels around the parks. The need, of course, for incentive and support, and also the need to have some consensus on how we actually go about profiling the greenhouse gas emissions at these industrial parks. Okay, topic around now, this will support the second outcome of the project that's looking more into the technical side of things. There was a very strong emphasis from the delegates that any solution that we come up with has to be site specific, look into the context of the park. There will be some parks that are relatively new in terms of infrastructure, whereas other parks may not have the right infrastructure to, for example, carry installation for solar rooftop if it's a feasible renewable resource. So a very strong emphasis that as we finalize the design of this program, be very flexible and open that whatever solution we look into, we will consider site-specific factors. It also has to address the context of these parks, taking into account any other government interaction that the parks are having so that there is synergy. Data is, of course, going to be the biggest enabler for this program. At some parks, when we did the visit, we found that there are some parks where data collection and data monitoring is quite good, whereas other parks, there's a vague idea of what is happening. So there has to be an extensive process where we collect the data and start analyzing it as we develop baselines. Okay. And of course, the emphasis was that whichever solutions we come up with, we have to take a very holistic look and integrate those solutions. Okay. Outcomes out of discussion point 3 was the need to establish forums where ideas, experiences can be shared through maybe existing networks of industrial parks, so that there can be peer-to-peer learning. The need that employees within the parks, they may need to be skilled. And of course, identifying opportunities where the communities can work with the park, maybe creating business opportunities, as well as I said earlier, seeing how we can integrate the community into the industrial park. One good example that we saw in KZN, for example, at Umbongo Twini, was that they shared how their community is deriving benefit out of their water management program. So if there is water cuts, for example, the community can interact with the park and access water. So we're trying to see beyond water, are there opportunities where energy resources or energy infrastructure can be shared? Of course, there will be legislative frameworks and maybe even restrictions that needs to be considered. So that's where we are in the process at a scoping stage, finalizing the project preparation and submission to the funders. And as Blanche has mentioned, we're looking to launch this project towards the end of the year. The key, as Blanche highlighted earlier, is not just to do assessments and studies, is to actually come up with demonstration projects that can showcase what sustainable energy solutions could look like for industrial parks, what storage, for example, energy. When you talk about energy security, what energy storage solution is commercially viable at the scale that we're looking at for industrial park. And another thing that we also considered in the design and the selection of the IPs is to have a variety of mix. We have Atlantis as one of the pilot parks, which is relatively a green field. So we're trying to also see how we can work and develop rather a blueprint for industrial parks that are still building, so that they build right and not have to retrofit, which is often an expensive exercise at a later stage. So we're happy to draw lessons from how private parks are managed, how setups where there's a centralized utility or energy supply management, how public government-owned parks are managed, and basically what different renewable energy or sustainable energy solutions could be applied at IPs. Yeah, so Blanche, do you want to say closing remarks?
Just to close, I think the last slide there was just to indicate the timeline. So in terms of, as Muntari is saying, We're hoping to start in December or maybe January next year for 4 years. But yeah, we're really looking forward to going forward. So thank you so much for your attention.